call out as an AP. And you know, if I want to, as I was talking about over there, I could call it out like this. I probably should do it. I've got a couple of pieces to it. And then I've got an and. So what is the thing that ruins my day? It's this combination. And so now the reason that I put these together is because there's kind of a couple of words actually showing up as a noun phrase by itself. Over there, they were basically just nouns. If you wanted to, just to be consistent, you can always put this one in. And then it would look exactly like that. You don't have to decide, do I use it or do I not? It's kind of up to you at this point. Isabel, you got your hand up? Are you sure? Now, where you guys, how can you see? Okay, right? If I take my glasses off, it doesn't work. Okay. So, let's do a couple of, oh, we forgot something here. What's the thing we left? Yes, we left the same stuff. Okay, so there's a couple at two ends of the spectrum now. Any others that you would like me to, anything else you'd like to see, something that raised a question you're not real sure about? I don't know how many were there, 5 or 6. That's the longest one. That one's the shortest one. Any others that you'd really like to see? Are you tired of trees? Oh. That's probably the one I would have chosen. It's right there. We're philosophically aligned. Kindred spirits, as it were. I write paper on my laptop or on the campus. Just because it gets longer doesn't make it harder. It's just kind of, you got to break it up into the little pieces. So, Cynthia, can you read that? Cool. Can you give me parts of speech? Great. Yep. One of the fanboys. Conjunction. Okay, cool. And it's a noun. Yes. I'm going to suggest it to being used like a noun. What do you think it's being used like? I agree with that. We could feasibly on a campus computer and call it a noun phrase, but if you say it, it's not a campus computer, it's a campus computer, which if you don't even hear the difference, that's not too surprising, but I agree with you. So let's use it as an adjective because that's what it's acting like. Let's see. Who wants to be brave and start us off? you could start us off because you had the question.
So computer would be
Do it any way you like. Very good. Okay, good. We can do it that way. That makes good sense. There you go. Okay, so we know we got to get that up there like that. Okay, great. This is an or. Oh no, that's an on. So what is on a campus computer? Okay, cool. So we're going to do it like this, right? The thing that's in a prepositional phrase is typically a noun phrase, so we know that's where that's going to go. Okay, let's skip or for a minute. How about this one? Okay. Okay. So we've got another one. Okay. And let's think here. We've got this conjunction in here. Where do I type my papers? Over in the other ones, it was easy because we could say a homework and papers, obvious, or cranky discs and or lost discs and cranky computers. We're going to do something simple, similar here. What do we have, do you think? I know I've got to pick this up, right? Because it's going to join these two. Nope. My laptop is the noun phrase. This is how we're going to do this. We're going to do it kind of like what we did before. We've got two things that are alike. You remember when I said that if we're looking at these kinds of fanboys, they join like things? So in this particular case, it is joining this and this. Both of them are prepositional phrases, so it makes sense that we'd end up with a conjoined prepositional phrase. Now, what's this one? This one's going to be a noun phrase, right? And the verb phrase is going to do what? Another noun phrase, make it easy for us. Then we're going to get the sentence up there. What do you think? So what? The S? I don't think I would do either of those things. What do I write? Okay, so I know this one's probably going to be a VP and it's going to pick up that because what do I write? I write papers. Now the question is, what do we do with this prepositional phrase? And it is basically telling us where we write the papers, right? The papers don't exist here. They aren't on there. They're created there or they're written there. So I'm going to come up here like this. You remember I said, make sure you make it clear which one is lower by putting the arrow to it. So we kind of get something like that. So as we think about it, you remember these things are going to conjoin things that are similar. Sometimes they're just words like homework and assignments. In other cases, they're going to be phrases that are similar on my laptop and on a campus computer. Sometimes we could even get, see it happen with a verb phrase. I go to the store and buy eggs. Let's take it like that. It's two verb phrases that are going to be there. What do I do? Well, I go to the store. So over here, I'm going to start over here and say, here's a verb. That's going to be a verb phrase. And what is it going to pick up? It's going to pick up this noun phrase because I buy what? Eggs, right? And then over here, I've got another verb phrase. Maybe it's because I can look at it, it's kind of, it just jumps out at me. But to the store, MP here, PP here, and I go do, what do I go? I go to the store. So it's telling me where. And over here, I've got this VP here. I'm going to have to come up here like this and join a verb phrase. Then I'm going to have my noun phrase. So once again, what did we do? We didn't join another sentence here because there's no subject. But we did join a verb phrase with a verb phrase. And that basically gave us a conjoined verb phrase. And the sentence is going to be the noun in that nature verb phrase. So keep in mind as you do these later on, remember that when you're looking at these fanboys, they're going to join things of equal type and weight. Noun phrases with noun phrases. Not typically a noun phrase with a verb phrase or a clause and a word. They join equal items. Okay? Are we good? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Oh, you're right. Oh, wait a second. Oh, this is the VP up here. Oh, up here. So, yes, this should be lower than that verb phrase. Yes. And the reason is it's basically describing where it happens. So it's, while it's a big prepositional phrase, if you really think about it, it's acting like a big adverb because it's saying where something happened. Does that answer it? Okay. Are we good? Anybody else? So before we get to the, I'll go ahead and tell you what I'm going to do. Next week, I've got to be gone on Thursday, not this Thursday, but next week. And what I'm going to do is just before I leave on Thursday, I'm going to provide you with a study guide that will cover syntax and semantics. So it's basically a study guide for the final. And we're just going to call that Thursday a study day. Okay, so you'll have at least the time period that we would normally have as a class to sit down and just do that to see how well you could do it in basically the same amount of time. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next 3 days, today and 2 more, on semantics. I'm going to miss that Thursday, so it'll be a study guide for syntax and semantics. And then the last 2 days of the semester, that next week, will cover pragmatics, as well as the study guide, so that you can see what the answers were. Okay? Sound like a workable plan? The only other thing I'd say is on that Thursday, I'll be traveling, so the only way I can have office hours at 11 o'clock will be by telephone. I won't be able to do Zoom, or I won't be in my office. Okay? Okay, so here's what we're going to do then. We're going to take an introduction to semantics, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 1 today, part 2 on Thursday, part 3 next Tuesday. And essentially, what we're going to be doing, if you've read the book, particularly if you read more than the part that I talked about, you may realize that there's more to semantics than meaning. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we're going to focus on the meaning part. So the homework for Thursday is project part 3 is due at the beginning of class. If by chance you're gonna miss class, just email it to me, that'll be fine. Otherwise, bring it in hard copy on Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. If you haven't read chapter 3, pages 26 to 39, you should, and maybe you want to reread it. And then there's 2 exercises, both of them are pretty short, exercise A and exercise B, and we will cover the material for today, and that would be the homework for Thursday. Okay? Questions on that? So, well, we kind of started every one of these sections with the idea of what is it? And in this case, it is what is semantics? So what do you think semantics is all about? You've read the chapter. The study of meaning. And there's different ways for us to deal with that study of meaning. We could look at the linguistic meaning of language elements or parts of speech or constituents. We can look at words and what does this word mean? And we might look at phrases, right? And we might also even look at sentences and try to determine what is the meaning out of these. Sometimes we take words and we put a couple of words together and they have a meaning of them of their own. Have you ever wondered why? Why does the word how next to the word come become the meaning why? How come you did that? How come does how come actually mean why? How come? Any thoughts? Not a one? Me neither. I have no clue as to why does how come joined together actually mean why. It's not howling, it's not coming, it's just how come. So we've got to take that into consideration on occasion. And the linguistic meaning of those 2 words together would be the same as why. And phrases, sentences, words all have meaning. Now, we're also going to keep in mind that semantics is one of the main parts of a language. Now, we call this, or a linguist would call this, the grammar of a language. Not so much the grammar that you study in, say, 310, right? But it's basically the form and structure. And so there are 5 general pieces: phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax. We've covered all of those. The 5th and final piece is semantics. Okay? And that's how we would classify, or we would use those things to essentially describe the grammar or the internal structure of the language. So semantics, in our case, we're looking at meaning. Now, historically, it hasn't always been focused down on just meaning. In fact, linguists probably came up with studying semantics later than philosophers did. And philosophers had a slightly different view. While they did look to see what the meanings was of the words that are going into a sentence, a large part of what they were looking at was truth conditions. If I say this, does this naturally follow? If I say this, are they contradictory, right? So philosophers would be looking for truth conditions. And they also focused on reference, which we'll do partly because it's also related to meaning, okay? But philosophers have been studying this for a long time, and then semanticists or linguists came along and they really focus in on the core meaning of individual words. And that's pretty much what we're going to do. Now, how do you go about describing? Well, some words are real easy to define or describe and understand the meaning. Like, well, we could look at blue and we could go, okay, I know what blue means. Or we could look at paper. You know what that is. We could think of simple verbs like eat or run. All of that works nicely. But then you get down to words that are kind of important, like of. How do you define of? I don't know. There's all kinds of meanings for of. How do you define on? Well, on would be right there, right? On the table. Nothing to it. Until you then start thinking about things like on time. Well, how do you stand on time? And so you begin to see that there's problems with trying to define words. Now let's start off with a simple approach, and it's called lexical decomposition. So it sounds more exciting than it is. But we want to take some lexical term, some word, and we want to figure out how can we characterize that word. Sometimes we want to do that by looking at other words around it. But in this case, lexical meaning words and decomposition means breaking it apart. We're going to look at the similarities and differences among related words. And if you remember back to phonology, we had this thing called distinctive features. Remember we had the distinctive features. We go in here and we say plus or minus various characteristics to define B versus D. Remember, right? Lexical decomposition does something similar. So let's take this idea here of man, woman, boy, and girl. Well, if doing the plus and minuses stuff, we can take these related terms. We've got man is plus male and plus adult. And woman also plus adult, but minus male. Or we could have done it the other way around and gone, man was a plus adult minus female, and woman was adult plus female. Doesn't really matter, but what we've got here is something that's showing the distinction. And what's the distinction between a man and a boy? Well, adulthood. Or a girl and woman is adulthood. Well, you still got the plus male and the minus male. So it's real simple, right? Not too bad. Let's extend it just a little bit. How do we want to handle it when we get to the point of throwing in a sow, a boar, and a piglet? Everybody remembers what a sow is, right? It was this class, I think, where I said, you're a bunch of city people don't know what sows are. Right? Was this class, wasn't it? Do you remember what a sow is? Yeah, a female what?
Cow?
A cow is a female cow.
I don't know. Pig?
Oh, female pig, right. So, how do we do with that? If I've got a sow, it's plus adult and minus male, is that the same thing as this? Well, it's not the same thing as a woman because it's got 4 legs, a curly tail, and all kinds of other goofy stuff. Boar, well, that's not quite the same there. And same thing goes for piglet, which would be a child. I think that's the correct word for a little kid pig. So what do? Well, we got to throw something in here that would differentiate those. So let's just do that. We'll just go the easy way. We can go, okay, these are plus human, and these are minus human. Otherwise, they're kind of the same. We've got gender, and we've got age. But we need something to split it up so that we can tell those from these, or the swine from the humans. All well, right? Nothing to it. Question is, what happens when we want to throw cow? What's a cow? Female. Oh, very good. But then if we just called it a not human, then we can't distinguish it from the pig or the sow. So we would have to somehow go in here and probably put in another layer, right? And now we've got something, we maybe go plus or minus human, plus or minus swine, and plus or minus bovine, which is the word for cattle, right? Now, it's getting a little more complicated. When you take something, some of these words are really kind of easy to do. The advantage of doing lexical decomposition is it's kind of intuitive. I got things that are and aren't various characteristics, and I can string them out, and I can grow the categories. So I throw those next three on there, I probably change human. Well, I have to have plus or minus human or plus or minus swine or plus or minus bovine. It's kind of long. So the real disadvantages here are, even though it's real simple and intuitive to look at it, it gets real bad when we start getting lots of features that we have to take into account. And while it might be okay for concrete nouns like humans and pigs and cows, or chalk and pencil and pens, once we get to other parts of speech, it gets really difficult to try to define them. So even other nouns, bureaucracy. I wonder how many things we have to do to come up with a definition and a lexical breakdown for either intelligence or bureaucracy. And worse yet would be verbs. I mean, we'd start with plus action, minus action. After that, it gets kind of difficult. So this hasn't gone very far. In the end, it's not something that we can logically extend very far. Kind of an interesting notion to begin with, and it helps us to see the differences in meanings. But it's not something we can use anyway. So we're going to leave it and leave that behind. You'll have a question in the homework, and my guess is a similar question on the test. So you want to understand about lexical decomposition and the place where we may go in and try to differentiate these two or these two. Oops, sorry, these two or these two. You want to get the concept. You won't do a whole lot of work with it, but you'll get a little practice. So they work okay for linguistic sense, the common meaning of an expression. Linguistic sense, meaning, that all sounds reasonable. Is there any other kind of meaning that we can attach to words? There's a linguistic sense. You go in, you look it up in the dictionary, boom, there it is. Metaphors would be a good example where it isn't going to necessarily work. Other places? Metaphors are good. How about this one? If I say beautiful, it means attractive, right? Or good looking, or pleasant, eye candy, all kinds of good things we could say about beautiful. We know what it means. We also know what genius means, right? Genius is very intelligent. Somebody, it's a person who is plus intelligent, right? But what is it when I go to do something like this? There is such a thing as speaker sense. I think my boss They never called me beautiful genius. They never called me a beautiful genius. What have they said to me though? Well, they might have done it like this and just gone out there and said, "Oh, beautiful genius." What does that mean? What does that mean? Was he calling me beautiful? Was he calling me a genius? See, this is what happens when you sit around this corner. I can't make it all the way back to Ashley. What did he mean? Oh, beautiful genius. Yes, he was being sarcastic. He was definitely being sarcastic. And so when we look at that, when someone has made just a terrible, stupid mistake, many of which I have made, proudly, speaker sense becomes very context specific. It depends on the context. He was not complimenting my eye candiness, nor my intelligence. He was calling me a stupid idiot, essentially. So it's very context specific. So linguistic sense, it's kind of what you would find if you went and looked it up in the dictionary. Speaker sense, not so much. It's kind of what does the speaker mean by this? and sarcasm, metaphors, and other things that they might use kind of come through. Now, one other thing I want to mention, and this is a good point to mention it, so we could also say, now, once we get down to speaker sense, it's kind of context specific, and it's subject to what does the speaker really mean? And that's going to be kind of the area of pragmatics. What I want you to write in your notes is pragmatics is very dependent upon context. So beautiful genius was not complimentary. If you see somebody you don't like walking down the street, she's walking towards you and say, "Here comes the princess." Maybe it's your little sister. That could be it. It's your little sister. You go, "Here comes the princess," because your parents like your little sister better than you. Then what are you going to do? It's not a princess like Princess Diana or Princess whoever the real princesses are these days. It's something being a bit sarcastic, and it's depending on the context. Because if you did see a real princess coming down, you could say, "Here comes the princess," and it would mean something totally different. Pragmatics is very dependent upon context. That'll be an important point on the test for you to remember. Okay? It's not that context doesn't matter for semantics, but it's oftentimes not very tightly controlled by the context. To a certain degree, yes, but for the most part, it's really literal meaning. Okay, so the next word we've got in here is lexical ambiguity. What does lexical mean? Lexical refers to Ashley. I made it past the first row. Ashley, what does the word lexical refer to? Not exactly the meaning, but close. The meaning of what? Words. When you see the word lexical, it's really generally dealing with the idea of words. You may remember we had lexemes. We talked about those when looking at morphology. That would be a word form. But lexical tends to be related to the lexicon. The lexicon from a linguist point of view is basically your own personal mental dictionary. You see this, you know it's chalk. You see this, you know it's a hand. You know, and you can put words to those things. That's what lexicon and lexical means. So lexical decomposition means how do we pull out the meaning of various words. Then we've got this idea of lexical ambiguity. We've seen this a couple of times, right? We've seen ambiguity in terms of morphemes, right? Because we saw some morphemes like undoable. Does that mean it's able to be undone, or does it mean it's not able to be done in the first place? Same word, two different meanings, depending on how you look at it. We've looked at it from syntax. For instance, he shot the man with the gun. Two different paraphrases. Again, you're going to see this on the test. Paraphrase number one, he shot the man who was holding the gun. So he had the gun. Or he shot the man using a gun, in which case it was this person who had the gun. So we've seen lexical ambiguity. We've seen syntactical and morphological ambiguity. Now we're seeing lexical ambiguity. Here's an example. Meet me at the bank. Meet me at the bank. Christina. Are there two meanings? Okay. Let's see. Anybody else? Anybody can see two meanings? What's a bank? What's another bank? Oh, sorry. What's another bank? Rolling down the river.
The water.
At the edge of the water. So in fact, we could sit here and go, meet me at the bank could have two different meanings depending on what you were talking about. It could be, meet me at First National, the regular bank where money goes, or meet me by the river. Right? Don't meet me in the middle of the river, meet me by the river. I've said both of those in the past. Go fishing with somebody, meet me at the bank. They knew I didn't mean the money bank. Right? So here's the idea. Here's another one. What are the two meanings for that's funny? That's funny. Lupe, what do you think? That's funny. Huh? Which one do you got? The funny one. Yeah, okay. Anything else? Go ahead, Gally. I can see it in your eyes. You got it right there. Oh, please. Kendra? You'll be embarrassed when I show you the answer. How many times have you heard somebody say, is that funny, ha ha, or funny, strange? Have you ever heard that happen? I mean, I've heard it happen lots of times. Somebody says, oh man, that's funny. Funny, strange, or funny, ha ha. Nobody's ever heard that? Who has? Yeah. All right, so I'm not the only one. Okay. You want me to tell you the cannibal joke again? I told you already, you know. I thought about it. As soon as I saw that, I know. I should probably tell it again, but I'm not gonna. Okay, so ambiguity. Here's two examples. Bank can have two different meanings, and funny can at least have two different meanings. Now, lexical ambiguity comes from several places. We've already seen it. Sometimes it is a matter of just the different meanings or synonyms. Polysemy is a word you've never heard before, or maybe you've heard it in somewhere. If you ever took a linguistics class or a grammar class, you've heard of polysemy. And polysemy is polysem. Poly means what? Nope. Many. Okay, so multiple, that's good. And semi in this case is really actually talking about synonyms. So polysemy or meanings, I should probably say it's meanings. Synonymy would be another word that we could use in a different place. The same word has many unrelated meanings. Bank, where I put the money, bank next to the lake or the river. Let's see, what else? Oh, fly. Here's a great. Oh, I'm not even cool. I'm not even young enough to say, man, that's fly. But I suppose that's probably passé now. Nobody says that anymore. But a fly could be the insect, it could be the act of flying, or it could be a zipper, right? We can have glare. Something shines intensely. Or it could be they stare angrily. It's not even the right one. And then there's the deposit, the kind you stick in the bank, or the white stuff that sticks on your shower wall if you've got hard water. Lime deposits. Very different meanings for the same words. Another place where we end up with ambiguity is homonymy, homonyms and homophones. For instance, here's one, bow and bow. Right? Bow, I'm gonna bow. I could also have a bough, which is the bough, a branch on a tree, right? When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall. I almost sang for you, but Diane asked not to. So here, bow and bow. They both sound exactly the same. The only way you'd know the difference is either the context or you would see it written out like this. But that kind of screws you up because we can also have bow. And if I have bow, well, it's spelled the same as this, but it might be a weapon, as in a bow and arrow, or it might be a knotted ribbon, like people might wear in their hair. So we've got a whole lot of ambiguity in here. You got to have the context to figure out what's going on. And sometimes they're spelled the same but pronounced differently. Sometimes they're spelled differently, but they're pronounced the same, but they're unrelated meanings. Stalk. There's a verb to stalk. I was stalked. There's also the long stem on some plants. And light, oh, this is great. Light's got a lot of ideas. I could talk about light generally outside, just light. I could talk about lights, a specific appliance that generates that light. If you go, oh, most of the time you could say that burden is very light, so it's not heavy. You go to other places, a lot of times in Asia, you'll find something like Coke Light or Pepsi Light, and it basically is talking about sugar-free. And you can also talk about having your coffee light, which means you're putting in cream. How are you going to deal with all of those meanings? You can do it easily, right? Because you've heard them and you've known the context, you can figure it out. But your students are going to have some trouble because light is the same word for at least these things and probably some more. Now, oftentimes they'll spell it L-I-T-E for sugar-free, but you don't hear the difference in the spelling. They're the same. Okay? So, starting off with our semantic relations among words, which will start today and Thursday, we have polyphony, where we've got the same word has a lot of unrelated meanings. We've got homonymy, which is homonyms and homophones, where we've got things that sound alike but are spelled differently, or spelled the same and pronounced differently. So those are issues. Which one? Bat. Great. That's another good example, right? I could have a bat for the baseball. I could have a bat that flies around. I could bat something out of the air as a verb, right? Ever had a bat in your house? Anybody? They let you climb up your hair and lay eggs. But we've had that. I've chased a bat around the house once. Pretty gross. Okay. Now you know a part of my life story. Batches. Keeping you. Okay. My favorite story is I was in Singapore one time. We had a brand new team. Actually had a Korean guy, that doesn't really matter if he was Korean, but we ended up going on this African safari thing at night. And so we walked through the bat cage. It's a bat, literally a big bat cage. I'm walking behind him and I go, and pull him off the ceiling. Okay. Hyponyms. This is maybe a new word. Hyponyms and hyponymy. Hyponym is a thing. Hyponymy would be kind of the study or the classification of it. And in the case of hyponyms, it's a word or phrase, usually a word, whose semantic field, that is its features, like if we were doing lexical decomposition, are included within another word or phrase. Boy, that sounds complicated. The picture is going to make it clear. But we've got two things here. Now we've got a specific word. We're going to call that the hyponym. It's kind of narrower meaning. And a more general word, which we would call the hypernym or the superordinate. And it looks kind of like this. I could tell you that we've got some entity, it doesn't matter, but in this case, it's going to be plus tree. Okay. If I wanted to come up with a hyponym, that is a more detailed something that has all of its features inside this, what might I come up with? What could I put in there? Everything that is a tree, but more specific would be,
Oh, plant?
I'm sorry?
A plant?
Nope, that's going to be bigger, right? Save that answer for my next question. You'll be a hero in a minute. Arpod? Sure, it could be a specific kind of tree, right? So we've got this general idea of tree. There's all kinds of trees out there. We can get down into this and say, well, there's an oak. Everything that is in oak is also inside tree. Am I right? Leaves, trunk, bark, roots. And oak is just a specific kind of tree. And then, Mandy, what is going to be something that's bigger?
The plant?
A plant. Because we've got plants, and everything that is a tree is a plant. But not everything that's a plant is a tree. Right? What is a plant but not a tree? Ariana, what's a plant but not a tree? A rose. Do you like roses? Okay. So it could be a rose, but would that be a tree? No. So the idea is everything in this oak is a tree, but not every tree is one of these. Similarly, every tree is a plant, but not every one of these is a tree. So the idea here is the more general word. In this case, the most general word is plant, right? And then we would normally call that either a hypernym, the hyper part, right? For something that's big like hypertension, hypersonic. And the thing that is smaller would be the hyponym. Okay, so this is a hyponym of tree. Tree is a hyponym of plant. We could go off and we could go on and on and on about different hierarchies of entities, right? That we could work our way through. But in this particular case, this should be relatively clear. Now, I don't know about the book. The book has a picture that I have never understood. It always seemed backwards to me. So you might want to think about that. Here's another way to look at it. Hyponyms, also called hyponyms. If we took animals, like we did where we first started with the lexical decomposition, well, we could say we've got animals that are feline and canine, bovine. We could stretch this out and go swine for pigs. We could go equine for horses. We could go, I don't know, amphibious for frogs, reptiles for snakes. We could just keep on going. But there, one thing in all of these cases is they are all animals. However, once we get down another layer, they start to separate out. A cat and a lion are both feline, but they are not canine. Nor is anything that's over here going to be feline, right? Dogs, wolves, coyotes, and foxes, all canine. Bovine would be cows, but not pigs. And similarly, if I threw swine out there, the swine would be, the pig would be swine, but it wouldn't be able to be bovine, or vice versa. Okay, so this is a fairly simple idea of hyponymy. Think about what is more specific inside a classification that's more general, inside another classification that is more general, etc. So we could have gone up here and said living creatures, thrown plants, and I suppose we could call microorganisms or something over here. We could, those are alive too. Break that down into bacteria, virus, fungi. We can go as far as we want to generalizing this stuff. But again, these are all concrete terms. They're kind of easy to break up. You get to abstract stuff, or you get to things that aren't just things, and like prepositions or something, they become a bit more difficult. Okay? So semantics, what we're going to deal with is meaning. And we'll leave the truth stuff. We'll hit that a little bit, but we're certainly not going to sit around and do it as the last few pages of the chapter go. So questions so far? Yes, ma'am. Well, no, the hyponym, the lowest level hyponym would be this. This is a hyponym of feline animals, right? On the other hand, feline could also be considered a hyponym of animals, right? So if you were going to go in there and say you only wanted to look at the most, you could break cat down probably and go tabby and what do they call Maine Coon and various other kinds of cats. You could break it down even further if you want to. But the idea is these are hyponyms of this, and this is hyponyms of that, etc. Okay? Any questions? Remember how many times I kept you late? How many times did I keep you late? And how late did I keep you? Let's give me credit for 5 lates at 3 minutes each. I'm giving you back 17 minutes. But I'm going to stay right here until everybody's gone. So if you've got questions, you just come up and see me. Okay? But sorry, didn't mean to end early, but I owed you. I'll either send it out an email or I'll send you an email to tell you it's out on D2L. I'll notify you that way. And I think I'll probably give you 2 bits. One that'll be kind of like, this is what's kind of stuff on the test, and then I'll give you some extra trees to work through. For those who just can't get enough trees. I do. I suppose you could draw it the other way if you wanted to.
Go from the more specific things to the less specific.
That's the way I do it, yes. Basically, his hyponyms are a subset of that. And that is a subset of that. So you can work your way all the way up to mammals, right? We could have driven it up further than that, probably. Yes. Right? Think about hyponyms.